Where is the house with the red door that Dany is always thinking about? Does it mean anything for the plot of A Song of Ice and Fire? And what's going on with that lemon tree? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. On this channel we dive deep into George R. R. Martin's world of Ice and Fire, as well as other great fantasy worlds like The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher. One of the most striking things about Daenerys' life and backstory is that she doesn't really have a home. Her family's ancestral home of Valyria is no more. She has never even set foot on the mainland of the land she claims queenship of, Westeros. She was adopted into the Dothraki culture, but has turned her back on where they say she should be now, among the Dosh Khaleen at Vaes Dothrak. And at the current point in the story, she is even exiled from the city she rules, Meereen. In her mind, the closest thing she has to somewhere that feels like home is where she spent the first 6 years of her life, a house with a red door and with a lemon tree outside her window. What she has been told, and what she clearly believes to be the case, is that this house was in Braavos. The story we're told is that after escaping Dragonstone as a newborn child with her brother Viserys, Sir Willem Darry, Aerys II's master-at-arms, took the two of them to Braavos, where they stayed in exile in apparent peace and comfort until Sir Willem died. We get various descriptions of their house there through Dany's memories. It was a large stone house with wooden rafters and carved animal faces. It smelt of scented oils. Dany had her own room, through the window of which she could see fields, and there was a lemon tree growing outside her window. It sounds lovely. However, at this point, their servants revolted, stealing their jewels and money. They were cast out of their home in Braavos and spent the next few years wandering from city to city, with Viserys peddling the last of their riches in increasingly desperate attempts to rally any support for his claim to the Iron Throne. Such was their life during this period that Viserys became known as the Beggar King. Eventually, they ended up enjoying the hospitality of Illyrio Mopatis in Pentos, which is where we pick up with them in A Game of Thrones. So that's the story we are told. Probably more importantly, it's the story that Viserys told Dany about her childhood, and that Dany herself believes and remembers. It seems very plausible as a riches-to-rags story, explains Viserys' embittered nature and his rather toxic relationship with Dany, and nothing Dany ever experiences seems to contradict this explanation of what happened when she was a child. So why do some people doubt its veracity? Well, most of the doubts surround the presence of that lemon tree I mentioned earlier, because there are several times in the story we are told not just that there are no lemon trees in Braavos, but no trees at all. For example, Arya thinks this: Braavos, devoid of grass and trees. They have no trees, she realised. Braavos is all stone, a grey city in a green sea. There are no trees here. And as if to ram the point home, we overhear a couple of conversations where someone is roundly mocked for thinking that there might be lemons growing in Braavos. The idea isn't just ignorant, it's laughable. So many people have taken that as the end of the matter. There are no trees in Braavos, and in particular, no lemon trees, so the house with the red door must be somewhere else. Which in turn leads to even bigger issues, because it would mean that Dany's whole childhood was a lie, and Viserys had kept on lying to her as she grew up, so she didn't know where she spent her childhood. Where could they have been that could have been such a secret? Does this call into question other things we think we know about her? So, whether a lemon tree could be growing in Braavos may sound like quite a niche question, but it's actually quite important. And to add to the mystery, many years ago, George R. R. Martin himself did admit that there was more going on there than meets the eye. He was asked this on an online forum: Dany remembers a lemon tree outside the house with the red door in Braavos, but citrus trees shouldn't really grow in Braavos' cold, foggy climate. Is this discrepancy significant? Does it point to future revelations about Dany's past? To which George R. R. Martin replied, "Very perceptive of you. Yes, it does point to, well, that would be telling." So the lemon tree growing in Braavos is deliberately anachronistic and does suggest something bigger in the plot, which leads us to two broad possible conclusions. Either Dany was not in Braavos as she thought, or she was, and that lemon tree is deliberately there to point to something else. I have seen some cogent arguments that perhaps Dany was in fact in Old Town. They certainly have stone houses and fields there, and that would tie the Hightowers into the main plot. They've been mysteriously quiet so far in A Song of Ice and Fire. But this and other arguments I've seen that perhaps the house was in Dorne actually raise even more questions, like if they were being sheltered in secret in Westeros by a sympathetic house, why did the servants rob them like that? And then why were they summarily thrown out onto the streets after just 5 or 6 years? We can't really imagine Leighton Hightower or Doran Martell doing that. And if it was Doran, when he sent Quentyn to Dany years later, why didn't he tell Quentyn that he had been sheltering Dany back then? It would help win her trust to know that. Or if he thought she'd blame him for throwing them out, Quentyn should be forewarned of that too. It makes no sense. No, Occam's razor here still points to Braavos as long as there is a reasonable explanation for that lemon tree. And thankfully, I think there is one. Because we are not here looking for orchards of lemon trees, just somewhere in the city that a lemon tree could conceivably grow, but most people wouldn't see. Although the lived experience of most of Braavos' citizens is that of there being no trees anywhere, there are actually trees in Braavos. It's just that they are hidden away in the private gardens of the super-rich, so most people don't see them. This is what Sam thinks on the subject when he visits Braavos. Sam's probably read a book on it. Trees did not grow on Braavos, save in the courts and gardens of the mighty. So trees are there in the gardens of the mighty, it's just that most people don't get to see them. But what about the climate? Well, in our world, lemon trees aren't exactly common in colder climates, but they can grow in temperatures down to about 10 degrees Celsius or so, that's about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Braavos is no tropical paradise, but it's also not exactly the frozen north, being at about the same latitude as the northern parts of the Vale of Arryn. When Arya gets there during the autumn, it is a bit chilly, but not freezing. Arya seems not to wear much to bed, for example, and the water she leaves out overnight is a bit cold, but not frozen. And when Dany was there years earlier, it was spring or summer, so a lot warmer. We know that the rich get fresh water piped direct to their houses in Braavos, so there isn't the concern about whether they need to use that nasty brackish water from the canals, and I'd expect there were gardeners there to tend to things, so there's no point of principle reason why a single lemon tree in a sunny, well-tended spot couldn't grow there. It just may not have been ideal conditions for it, and it will probably die when winter comes. And we even have further evidence in The Lands of Ice and Fire. For those who don't know, that's a book of maps of Westeros and Essos, fully authorised and signed off by George R. R. Martin himself. It contains, among many other things, a map of Braavos, which shows one place in particular where there are large stone houses, trees, and fields. The Sea Lord's Palace. Which, when you think about it, makes a lot of sense. Viserys and Dany were clearly somewhere they felt safe from potential assassins sent by Robert Baratheon. Where safer than the residence of the head of state of the most powerful and technologically advanced city-state in Essos. Braavos has a long history of political engagement with Westeros, so it makes sense for them to offer a refuge to the last Targaryens while waiting to see what happens in Westeros. Who knew back then? Robert Baratheon's reign was still young and may yet fail. Why not shelter them for a bit, just in case? Also, we're told a lot that Braavosi politics can be brutal, and the Sea Lord changed in violent and sudden shifts of power. Perhaps this happened at the end of the time when Viserys and Dany were there. The servants stealing their things could be the old Sea Lord's employees taking what they could before they themselves fled. A new Sea Lord arriving would probably take a different political position, particularly as sometime around then the Iron Bank of Braavos began to support the Baratheon regime with significant loans, so casting them out at that point again makes sense. Added to which, the decor Dany remembers does fit with what we know of the Sea Lord's style. The carvings of animals fits with the fact that he has a rare menagerie in his grounds, and the many faces matches up to the style of his pleasure barge, which is covered with painted faces, we're told. And there are more anecdotal bits of evidence too. It's a stone house, which almost all houses in Braavos are, albeit with wooden rafters, which is the kind of ostentatious show of wealth you would expect from the Sea Lord. I could go on. So, if there is no particular reason to doubt that the house with the red door was in Braavos, Why did George R. R. Martin say that the lemon tree points to something? And why have Dany think about it so very much? Because she does. At my count, she thinks of that house with the red door on at least a dozen different occasions, usually longingly. 2 reasons, I think, both of which are very important. First up, the lemon tree establishes the link between Dawn, Daenerys, and Braavos. We're told so many times that lemon trees are from Dawn, so where else might that one have come from? Well, it turns out there is a bit of a backstory to this. In A Dance with Dragons, Dany receives a visitor the day before she is due to be married, Quentyn Martell. Quentyn was there to suggest a marriage between himself and Dany, and took as evidence of House Martell's good intentions a copy of an agreement that was made years earlier to marry Viserys, the king in exile at the time, remember, to Arianne Martell, Quentyn's sister. That agreement obviously lapsed with Viserys' death, so Doran was trying again with Quentyn and Daenerys. Dany politely declines the offer. The important thing here is actually not so much the contract itself, but who witnessed it. Because although the contract could have been made by representatives of the families, and to be clear, neither Viserys nor Arianne knew anything about it, it was signed on their behalf by Sir Willem Darry and Oberyn Martell, the witness had to be there in person, and the witness was the Sea Lord of Braavos. And as Sir Willem Darry was bedridden through most of this period, and the Sea Lord tends to stay in Braavos, that places the signing of that agreement and Sir Willem Darry, and therefore the Targaryen children, in the Sea Lord's palace in Braavos. Think about this for a moment from the Sea Lord's perspective. The recently deposed King of Westeros comes to you seeking protection, and probably can pay a reasonable sum for it. Not only that, but their protector, a respected Westerosi noble, Willem Darry, is convinced that there's a way back to power for the Targaryens. He can tie in Dawn, one of the 7 kingdoms, into a plot to put them back onto the throne in the place of the usurper Robert Baratheon. Of course, it came to nothing. Robert Baratheon secured his rule and the Targaryen children started to run out of money. So Willem Darry died and the Targaryens were thrown out onto the street. Braavosi politics can be a cutthroat business. In this context, the lemon tree becomes a clear hint that Dawn is linked to Daenerys and Braavos. Perhaps Oberyn even brought a sapling over from Dawn as a gift when he travelled there to get the marriage pact signed. A lot of the Winds of Winter will focus on who Dawn will support for the Iron Throne, and we should probably be paying attention to who Braavos might support as well. If, as seems likely, Viserys and Dany were cast out of the Sea Lord's palace because of a violent change in administration, then what if that political party came back into power? It's beyond the scope of this video, but there are hints that things are about to change politically in Braavos. Braavos will have heard the rumours that Dany now has dragons and she's using them to get rid of slavery. How will they react? The First Lord of Braavos is anti-slavery and they've fought wars over the issue, so might they even consider joining forces with her? As I said, the implications of that lemon tree are quite far-reaching. But the second important point here about that house with the red door is not about politics and war, but what it tells us about Dany's character, something that we don't often see or think about, because above all else, the house with the red door and the lemon tree outside represents a safe place to Dany. Security, home, a chance to be who she is, not on the run from a man she never met, but who killed her father and brother, and not trying to be the queen of a city whose culture she doesn't truly understand. A chance to run around barefoot and just enjoy life. In Daenerys' short life, she has been constantly on the run from people trying to kill her because of her surname, or because they want to take her dragons, or because they disagree with her stance on slavery, or any one of a number of other reasons. We've lived with her through several assassination attempts, rebellions, wars, starvation, you name it. She has never been truly safe, except for those few short years in Braavos. That was when she was and felt safe. That was when she could be free of cares. That was when she could be truly herself, free from all these prophecies, responsibilities, wars, assassins, and people trying to manipulate her or use her. A Dance with Dragons shows us the battle that is going on within Dany. Part of her is this great warrior queen we see. She conquers cities or threatens to raze them to the ground. She crucifies her enemies and defies civilizations that have lasted for millennia. We keep getting this imagery of her as Aegon the Conqueror invading Westeros with her 3 dragons, but deep inside, she also craves the lemon tree and the house with the red door. She thinks of it or longs for it again and again. It represents home, security, safety. Dany only had that as a child for a few short years before life brutally interfered. There's no wonder, really, that she longs for it now. This need for a simple, safe life is something we don't often look for in Daenerys, the small child trapped within, but it's probably her most core desire, to be safe and loved and protected. She had that briefly with Khal Drogo, which is why she longs for that as well, and she imagines being with Daario in the house with the red door for the same reason. And it's something we should bear in mind for the endgame of A Song of Ice and Fire. Dany isn't just about conquering and death. Above all, she craves love and peace and safety, even if she doesn't know it about herself. What do you think? Do you agree? Let me know in the comments below. If you'd like more videos like this, diving into A Song of Ice and Fire, there's a playlist appearing now on the left of your screen. Or to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon on the right of your screen. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.